Welcome to the Eternal ROI Podcast, where we share the real stories of workplace transformation. And now, here are your hosts, Will Stewart and Chris Patton.
Welcome to the Eternal ROI Podcast. Good to have everybody watching and listening along. I'm your host, Will Stewart, joined as always by Chris Patton, CEO of His Way at Work. Hey, Chris.
How are you, Will?
Doing fantastic. We don't have any guests today. It's just you and me.
It's just us two.
Yeah.
Wow, we're going to have some fun then.
Absolutely. And we have a fun topic. We've talked, but it's not really a fun topic.
I don't know if fun is the descriptive word, but it's certainly relevant.
And hopefully it'll help people, because we talk a lot of times, even offline, before we have people come in. You kind of ask the same question, which is,
what's your greatest challenge to these CEOs?
Exactly.
And it's pretty consistently, at least in the last 12, 18 months, but frankly, it's been an ongoing challenge.
Sure.
And that's, how do I get good people?
Yeah.
And how do I keep the good people that I have? And there's just a whole lot to that, right? So I think it's a great idea that we're tackling this today. We're not going to have all the solutions here. There's no silver bullet to go implement tomorrow that gets you good people next week. But I think we've got some good input here.
There's some great principles. And if there was ever a need to attract and maintain good talent, it's today. There's the Great Resignation. There's all these people who aren't even getting into the workplace to begin with, not even to resign. They're just not even getting in. Yeah. If you go to any LinkedIn feed and just start scrolling through the articles that people are posting, it can scare you.
That's right. And the interesting thing is, we can talk about this season, but the truth is, this topic and what we're going to bring as an approach to this topic is truly evergreen content, meaning this approach is gold, whether it's today in the current environment or a year or two from now in whatever the environment looks like then, better or worse. It's good business.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when, not amazing, but sometimes we act like it's amazing when God's way actually is the best.
It's incredible. It's almost like he has a plan that if we just follow it, then we'll see reap the benefits of it.
Exactly.
So how should people start if they're saying like maybe they need to change some things? What are some of the ways that they can just get started?
I think the first thing we got to recognize is this is not an overnight solution.
Yeah.
Right. So there are things that we will talk about that you can begin to see fruit fairly early in the process, but this is not a go out and do these 5 steps or whatever, and a month from now, you've got the people you need. Yeah. It's not like that. Frankly, best practice, and we'll probably repeat this a couple times, but best practice is 10 years ago, you started doing these things. Right. And today you don't have as big a challenge with getting and keeping the right people as the others around you do.
Yeah.
So it's the old adage, the best time to plant an oak tree was 10 years ago. Right. Second best time, today.
Absolutely.
So you got to recognize that, because if you're constantly looking, searching, Googling for overnight solutions to this issue, you're going to get frustrated, or you're going to try some things that you either can't sustain or may get you in legal trouble. Sure. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So that's the first recognition. So just know there will be some fruit, but the greater payoff is in the long run.
So the key to it is consistency. You have to
over
create
time.
a clear plan.
That's right.
And be consistent, show up the same way every day to work, and grow that plan and do what you need to do.
Yes.
And really, yes, you want to track metrics and you want to make sure you're seeing results, but it's kind of like when you go working out of the gym, like if you work out once, then come home to your wife and say like, hey,
check
can you tell?
Out. Yeah.
She may lie, or she may say the truth.
Or she may laugh, right?
That's right.
Yes. So that's absolutely true. And, the main thing here is, I say, accept the long-term nature of it, is 100% of frustration comes from missed expectation, right? So if our expectation is immediate results and we don't see that, we're prone to give up, we're prone to quit, we're prone to tighten up and get frustrated, obviously, but start pushing things harder than they should, or wrong motives. So anyway, I think we've got that point across, but just understand it's a long game, right? You're not playing a short game here.
Absolutely.
So, what we're really talking about, not as a whole, but central to this conversation is your company's core values. And, as soon as I say that, some of y'all just clicked off and just checked out and said, I don't have time for that. I need to go find good people. Well, listen up, because this may be why you're in that situation. Yeah. So part of what His Way at Work does, part of what really good companies do, is to determine as a group, as an organization, what are our core values. There's so many materials out there. It's not just His Way at Work that helps with this, but what are the core values of the company? And as the leader, either the CEO, leader of the company, or a leader within the company, the first step you've got to take is living out those core values yourself.
Absolutely.
Because we can talk all we want about how critical it is to the company and how we're founded on this, and our foundation is this, and we're built on these values. But if we're not living them out as the leader in a very obvious and accountable way, then forget the rest of it. Yeah. It's not going to matter.
And that requires if you as the leader have to live your core values, that requires a couple things. First, you have to have intimate knowledge of these core values.
You got to know them.
Yeah,
that's right.
They have to go from the wall to your brain and to what you do, and the core of who you are. The core values for the company means to be your heart, a heart thing. But secondly, it has to be something that's like doable and understandable, recognizable, and where you can apply it to your life.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things we do in our implementation and in the work on core values in a company is that we assign behaviors to each of those core values. So, for example, you take integrity is a pretty common core value. Well, we've got a trucking company that has warehouses and all sorts of inventory, and they, as we help them take integrity from the top offices down to the entry level, for a CFO, integrity means, well, I'm keeping one set of books, right? It's not which set do you want to see, right. But it's, it means one thing to the CFO or to the VP, but to a forklift driver, it means something totally different, or they may not even understand what it means because it doesn't apply to them. So as we assign behaviors in this situation, the behavior was anytime a forklift driver spears a pallet, damages a pallet of product, or backs into a wall and knocks a hole in it, they hop off the forklift in a safe place and go report it.
Yeah.
So reporting of damage is a metric that company measures. So therefore, unreported damaged pallets are an inverse reflection of integrity.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So it's just a way to measure and track what we're doing. So you are dead on. You got to know the core values. You got to live them out as the leader, but you've also got to know what do they mean. And every level of the company needs to understand how it applies to them.
And there's so much freedom in that, because integrity is not a word that we use in common vernacular.
That's right.
But secondly, if I know the requirements that you have for me as an employee, and because it's integrity, I got these lists of checklists I have to do. There's such safety in that. I know that you're going to be happy with me if I'm living this out. And for you as the business owner, you have to make sure that those values properly match what you're wanting from your employees so that you can have a profitable company.
Exactly. So live them out yourself as a leader, but you just said it. Make your expectations of the employees on your team or within the company, make the expectations clear.
Yeah.
Clearly defined, measurable, not, you just weren't good at integrity this last quarter.
What does that mean?
What? How? Well, I just think you need to work harder at it.
Yeah.
Right. So yes. So give them clear expectations. Make sure there's clear understanding of what it means and how it applies to their job. Right.
Yeah.
And so huge part of what we need to do. But then once you're living it out and you've got your team, your company, your employees living that out, they understand the expectations. They're held accountable. Right. So let's pause there a second. If you've got a team of, I don't know, call it 20 employees or 2,000 employees, it doesn't matter, and you start clearly living out the core values, you're communicating them, you're giving clear expectations to them, and you're holding them accountable, that process right there is going to weed out those that don't live out your core values.
Very quickly.
Right? You don't take an inventory and say, of these 2,000 or these 20 employees, these 4 don't do the core values.
Yeah.
You clearly communicate, you lay out expectations, you hold them accountable, and you let them choose.
Yeah, exactly.
And they will self-select over time, and that's how you're getting the wrong people out. And it's not just a sudden chop the block.
And then you have that core team of people. They're like, man,
they're freed up.
Integrity is what we're all about, and that's really big for me. And I really like that. And they're holding me to it, and I can do this, and I'm doing that to my teammate right beside me, and I'm coming to work whistling because I get to do these things.
Exactly. So go back to what we originally said. This is not an overnight thing. So you don't walk in Monday morning and say, hey, new core values, expectations, everybody's accountable. I saw you this morning not pick up that piece of trash. You're gone. And that's not what we're talking about. It's over time. You're laying these out and you're giving them a chance. You don't first offense cut them, unless it's an egregious violation. But basically, you're doing this over time. But you're also over time integrating those same core values into your hiring practices, into your interviewing questions, right? Into your job description, right? Your job description should carry these core values as central theme throughout the tasks and the responsibilities of those employees. Yeah. And then when you start determining the performance metrics, the KPIs for each job, these core values should be part of that, right? And then when you're doing performance reviews on performance, you're also including their performance in relation to the core values. All throughout the organization, the HR elements say, you've got these core values built in, this culture that you're trying to create. Yeah. So people coming in are vetted at the door, and you're not letting more people in the door that don't align with your core values.
Because there's going to be people that hear a certain one and they're like, that's dumb. And they will self-select out. Isn't that so much better than hiring them, trying to, fit them into this, square peg, round hole type situation for 6 months? You waste money on training. You don't get a good profit from them because they're not working. And then finally they're like, okay, I quit. Yeah. And you're like, what happened? Well, you didn't have your core values lined out properly.
And there are some, there's some people saying right now, well, they lied in the interview. Okay. There may be somebody that's desperate enough for a job that they'll mask themselves. I can't believe people would actually do that, but they might actually try to be somebody they're not coming in the door. One reason you build those core values into your interview process, you're asking questions that they probably haven't heard at other companies. They're not giving the rote answer that they've been taught and trained to give in interviews, and you'll more likely select them out then, but also in the job description and in the, not just an annual review, but the continuous review against those behaviors, those KPIs, you will more quickly select out, right? If they do get in.
And if they do get in, they've climbed over walls. They've, swam over a moat. They've done all these different things. So it's more effort and exertion to get in there.
There is none of this that we will share is foolproof and 100% effective all the time. Yeah. Right? What we're doing is playing the odds. Yeah. What we're doing is saying, all right, if we're doing this consistently all the time, we will dramatically reduce those times where we hire somebody we shouldn't have, or where we allow somebody to hang around that we shouldn't have. Yeah. So that's the point.
And one more thing on that, as we evaluate employees, when it comes to core values, having those core values be clear helps you as a leader understand why they may or may not be working in the company. So, sometimes you have that gut of like, I don't know if this person's a good fit. Well, if you don't have a metric to go against it other than just performance or how many widgets. Yeah. And so many business leaders are gut feeling based, which is really great for starting a company, but terrible for continuing one.
That's right.
And so, but if you have a company where your values are very clear, and then you understand what that value means, and then you are applying that to that role when they're stepping out of line, and we're not talking about maybe even firing, maybe it's just correction, like, hey, let me help you with this. It's going to help you versus just like, oh man, Betsy's not doing it for me. And
that's right.
For whatever reason.
Yep, that's exactly right. So once you're living them out, right? Mm-hmm. You've clearly communicated, given the expectations, accountability, and so forth, and you integrate them into your HR processes. You also want to constantly communicate these core values. As a leader, your job is to over-communicate the company purpose, company mission, the core values, this whole vision for the company, right? So that they're constantly hearing it, it's constantly reinforced, you're still living it out, and it never disappears from the conversation because that stuff leaks, right? It doesn't stick. And so while you might be tired of saying it because you're the one that's been saying it for 2 years, what percentage of your company is brand new in the last 6 or 8 months, especially if you're growing?
Yeah.
They may have only heard it twice,
Yeah.
right? So you continue to do that, to pour that out there, and you're helping them. This is a key point. You're helping them see that they're part of something bigger than themselves, right?
Yeah.
They're part of a bigger vision. In the companies we work with, His Way at Work, the mission statement, the vision statement, the purpose statement that these companies come up with tells their employees, you're not here just to provide a net profit to line the pockets of the owner of the company.
Yeah.
You're here to achieve a greater purpose. In many cases, it is to care for people in a way that honors God or to do something in a bigger scope. And people need that.
Yeah.
Now, they don't walk into the interview and say, by the way, tell me, where am I part of something bigger than myself, right?
Right.
It's not something they communicate, but it's something we know that they need and want.
Yeah.
And so as we communicate these things, we're helping to show them that.
And having that direction is so important because as you're creating a community of people who are like-minded, working together, pulling toward the same goal, it's got to be a goal that we all believe in.
That's
and
right.
It's got to be a path. And we're not talking about necessarily faith. If someone's just not of the Christian faith, but they're just like, this is a great thing. We're helping our community. We're serving people and helping people. There's a lot of things that people can get on board with and support.
Yeah.
The other thing about that is if an owner is not talking about the values and the mission, like they should be, employees are listening to what you talk about the most. And so if you're talking about, the profit percentage or whatever and yelling about this, yelling about that, and then every now and then it's values.
They know what's important to them.
Right. Yeah. And so it's that ratio too of what are you talking about? Because people want to help. They want to serve as best they can. And they want to be a productive, member in the team. And they're going to follow that communication.
Man, that's such a good point. So the owners, the CEOs, the leaders in the companies that truly do this well are the ones who understand why is so important.
Mm.
They're not the ones that read a Lencioni book and said, well, I'm supposed to do this, so I better.
Yeah.
But, I forgot. I'll do it next month.
Yeah.
It's the ones that know if I don't do this, I don't get the culture. And if I don't get the culture, I don't get the right people. And if we don't get the right people, we don't keep the culture.
Yeah.
Right? It's that whole cycle. And then it's really boils back to God's put this business in my hands for a season to create eternal impact. I can't do it without the right people and the right culture.
Yep.
It won't happen.
Yeah.
And so when a leader truly gets that in their heart, these tips are things we can help them think through and carry out, but we don't have to remind them at that point. They get it and they're really executing on that.
Yeah. Man.
So,
and once you get that engine started, sometimes it's hard.
It's absolutely hard.
You will see results and you will see growth from it.
Well, and you will be challenged on your core values.
Yeah.
One, you're not perfect. You're human. So living out the core values, as we've described it, is not something you're capable of doing 100% of the time.
Sure.
You're going to fail. So who's the leader that gains the most in those situations is the one that acknowledges, I blew it.
Yeah.
I blew it. And no, it's not okay that I blew it, but I blew it and I'm willing to pay the consequences and I'm willing to admit it and I'm going to keep working at it.
Mm.
And that communicates just in ways that you can't even imagine. When
people want to work for someone like that.
People want to work for somebody like that because they're real.
Yeah.
They're not untouchable. They're not unapproachable.
Yeah.
Right. So big deal there.
Yeah.
Big deal there.
And then that trickles down to the lowest employee, the newest person that, if they make a mistake, they go, okay, the leader said, hey, I messed up. This is a culture that it's safe to own your mistakes and do the steps necessary to, fix it.
Yeah. So we said at the very beginning, it's kind of a chicken or egg, right?
Yeah.
You got to get the right people to have the right culture, and then you got to have the right culture to get the right people. So if you're going down this path and you're doing these things that we're talking about, chipping away at it or building over time that culture, it's not overnight, but you find yourself 6 months, a year, 3 years down the road, you've got a much, much better culture and you're starting to attract right people.
Yeah.
And you look back and go, man, it's already been a year. It's been 3 years.
Yeah.
But you're starting to see much greater fruit and multiplied fruit.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to tell you, you get a group of people together that have the same vision for this company, the same core values. They want to live out and be in alignment with those values. They want to work with people like them.
Yeah.
They may be different types, colors, genders, races of sorts, but they have same core values. That's who they want in the company, and they will help you recruit.
And that's an unstoppable force.
It is unstoppable. And the community around you starts to figure out what you're about, and they want to work with and for you.
Yeah.
So eventually you create a culture that is sucking people towards you that want to be a part of what you're doing, and you're holding people that want to stay and wouldn't want to go anywhere else.
Right. Yeah.
And even some cases, they hadn't been there long enough to truly know what they've got, or it's maybe their first job and they leave to go find something for another $1 an hour, and they realize, whoa, you guys take me back.
Yeah.
Right? Because they see this is unusual.
Yeah. And that's such a powerful thing. And once you hit that tipping point,
Yes,
where the culture starts to become self-sustaining, obviously the leadership always needs to be part of it,
got to
helping
continue to
motivating
communicate it. But the other employees do protect the
right.
culture.
And it's less pushing a rope and more now there's people who are taking ownership of it. And that's what
Yeah.
you want. You want people in their positions
That's
taking
right.
ownership of this, saying this is not, the big boss's upstairs vision. This is our vision as well. And this is
Yeah.
our culture. And this is where we are heading. Yeah.
That's right.
That's so good.
I want to give you an example. So I'm going to tell you a story, true story, still developing, because I heard the last piece of this yesterday, or excuse me, this morning, and it only happened yesterday. The story is a year or so old, but a company owner that we work with was working with his family members and their donor advised fund, and was designating or delegating out, distributing out portions of this donor advised fund for each family member to send out into various charitable organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a family gathering at the end of a year to determine where their family profits were going. And while they're in the middle of this meeting, one of the executives with the donor advised fund organization walks into the room.
Mm.
Now they're in the donor advised fund organization's head office, right? And this executive walks in and says, "Can I interrupt your family meeting for a moment?" And they say, "Well, sure, I guess." And he says, "I just need to tell you a quick story." He says, "I don't know that you know this. In fact, you don't even know me." And the owner said, I can't say that I do.
Mm.
He said, "My son works for your company. And less than a year ago, my son and my daughter-in-law were in such a bad situation with their marriage that it was basically broken, and they were going through the divorce. And my daughter-in-law plans were to take my grandchildren cross country, move to California, and leave my son here. And I knew for a fact I was not going to see my grandchildren again. And I love my grandchildren. But I also love my son. I even love my daughter-in-law. But because my son works for your company, your caring team stepped in and they saw the need. They approached the son. They paid for a family or a marriage retreat weekend, paid for counseling, ongoing marriage counseling, gave some financial assistance throughout the process. And today, basically a year later, my son and his now still wife are happily married. They are thriving. My grandkids are still here, and I get to spend time with them all the time. And I need you to know as a family, but also you as the owner, what you're doing is impacting families and people that you have no idea about, because we've never met. You didn't know my story. And it's affecting generations, because my grandkids are going to grow up with a married set of parents, with a dad who's living an example, with a mom who's living an example. They're going to grow up with grandparents who are close by. They can live. It's just huge impact.
Yeah.
Now,
ripples.
There's a lot I could unpack there, and I will in a moment. But that was 6 months ago. That conversation happened. Just yesterday, that son, the employee of this company we're talking about, his leader in the department was in a leaders meeting and called his name out. He wasn't even there, just called his name out in this leaders meeting and said, "I just need to acknowledge so-and-so because he's crushing it on the job. He is just killing it. He's doing a fantastic job, so much so that I need to call him out and acknowledge him. And I want anybody here that gets a chance to go by and just pat him on the back.
Wow.
Now, what the heck does that have to do with what we've been talking about?
Everything.
Everything, right? So let's go back. Let's go back to a year and a half ago. And this employee and his wife are about to get a divorce, and she's going to leave the East Coast and head to the West Coast with his kids. What kind of a productive employee is he, even if he stays? Not much. Most likely, that's turnover waiting to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Voluntary or involuntary, he won't be there long and probably will struggle in many ways for a while.
Yep.
Secondly, you've got a marriage that would be broken apart without a doubt. And instead, it's intact and thriving. But now, a year and a half later, you've got that same employee just crushing it in his job. What kind of productivity, what kind of gain is the business getting from just that employee's input and productivity, right? And the generational impact, right?
Right.
We can go on, but it's all because years before, a business owner decided, here's how we're going to create a culture. We're going to have these core values. We're going to set them up. We're going to communicate them. We're going to live them out, and we're going to carry them out over time. And when an employee of ours, a member of our family is in crisis, we're going to step in and we're going to jump in and make sure they're cared for and loved on.
Yeah.
And we're going to do whatever it takes to keep them together and to, now, there was not once an agreement put in front of the employee, here, sign here, we'll pay for all this if a year and a half from now, you'll be a crushing employee and make a lot of money for us.
Yeah.
No. It's just the understanding that over time, if we care for and love on these people, their lives are better.
Yeah.
And I know in this case, and in the cases of companies we work with, it's because now those employees and their family members will see a God that loves them.
Yeah.
And be excited and interested in finding out more about that.
Right.
But there are also fruits of this in the business. And then the cherry on the top is the CEO had no clue any of that was happening.
Isn't that incredible? And so he started this whole program in his company probably before that employee ever joined.
Well before that employee came in the door.
So this is something that was created well in advance. And it goes kind of back to what we were talking earlier, is you got to start now if you didn't start in the past.
That's right.
So that's my first takeaway. The second takeaway is, like you said, the CEO didn't know.
Had no clue.
And so that means he created processes and created things that allows it to be self-sustaining and perpetuating with multiplying his efforts of as he's kind of spinning that wheel, it's really spinning with the help of the other people that he has in place to make it all work.
So bring it back to the practical and say, all right, the original point of this episode is, how do we get really good people and keep them? Name the people in this picture. You've got the employee himself and his wife. Do you think they're telling anybody about this company?
All the time.
They won't shut up about it. I guarantee it.
Yep.
Do you think the grandfather that works at a donor advised fund organization is telling anybody other than just this family? He's talking about it all the time.
Yeah.
Right? The neighbors of those people are probably tired of hearing about this story.
Yep.
Right? And the employees around that employee, my point is this, that picture, though just one example, is what's drawing good people to a company.
Yep.
And you can't create that in a day, but if you start today, you can create that over time, and you're not doing it all yourself. It's the others that take ownership, as we've said.
Yeah. And
then you end up with things happening like that, and the CEO has no idea.
And we're talking about multiple multipliers when it comes to like the spread into the community of making a difference in your community, and then also the return of the investment. It's an eternal ROI.
And then you got the 3 listeners today that are going to tell this story, right?
That's right. Exactly. So what would you tell, as we close this down, the business owner who says, Chris, you don't know my story. You haven't seen my company. It's toxic. I've made lots of mistakes. I've been doing the wrong thing for 10 years now. I should have done this 10 years ago, and I didn't. I see it now, but I look around at everybody that I have hired up till now. I feel like it's all bad apples. What do I feel hopeless. I should just keep doing what I'm doing and just, limp along.
Sell. Sell the company. Yeah. No, I'm kidding. It's start with one step. Just start down the path, right? There are a number of different first steps, but the first step is the acknowledgement that two things. One, this is not an overnight solution to a problem you've created over a number of years.
Yeah.
Two, the path you've been on up to this point doesn't have to be the path you're on in the future.
Yep.
So you make a decision, draw a line in the sand. I happen to know that this particular business owner in this particular situation we just described had exactly what you just described 15 years ago. And yet they came to a realization, they made radical change, and they just started taking baby steps one at a time. A year or two later, they didn't have this culture. 3 years later, they had a much better culture,
right?
But it wasn't this one.
Yeah.
It takes time, but progressively gets better, especially as you are empowering those employees themselves and making multipliers out of them, not just trying to do it yourself.
I love that.
Yeah.
No better time to start than today, other than in the
10
past.
years ago. The only time available is today.
That's
or
right.
Ignore it, cross your fingers, and hope it gets better.
Lots of great information today, lots of great tips for business leaders. Hope everyone takes it to heart and start changing their culture today.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Eternal ROI. If you like what you heard, we would love for you to take a moment and leave us a review and share an episode with somebody you know. If you are inspired to begin bringing the power of God's love into your workplace, take a moment and check out our free assessment at hwaw.com. It'll only take you a few moments. It'll give you a snapshot of what your company looks like and maybe some ways to move forward. Just click on the link in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.